Welcome back to Combat Mission Fortress Italy, where we are going up into the mountains. This is the Riva Ridge scenario from the Rome to Victory module. It's February 1945. A few days ago the Americans attacked and kicked us out of our positions on this ridge line. Now they've left without, for whatever reason, conducting a relief in place, and we've got a brief window where that position is unoccupied and we might be able to get back up there before the Allies can plug the gap. The ridge itself is a very imposing feature. It's steep, rocky and pretty bare. We're above the tree line, there's snow on the ground, it's a little bit misty, and we're starting off just before dawn. On our side of the ridge there's a deep but narrow wooded valley where we have an infantry company preparing for the assault. Beyond that there's a secondary but considerably lower ridgeline occupied by a HMG platoon and some sniper teams. Then at the base of that, featuring some more woods, we've got a medium mortar platoon. There'll be some reinforcements arriving in 20 minutes, along with a battery of off-map 75mm howitzers. We're commanding a grenadier unit here, which according to the briefing is made up of Eastern Front veterans who were invalided out for various reasons. So they're experienced, but there are some question marks about their levels of motivation and physical fitness. They are, however, using the 45 type grenadier organisation, so we have two so-called heavy Sturm platoons, which are just normal German rifle squads with a single LMG supported by riflemen. Then we have a single Sturm platoon, where almost everyone has an MP44 assault rifle, but no LMGs apart from in the third squad, which has two. The platoons should all have Panzerschreck teams, but they've left them behind, which you could argue makes sense in the mountains. And they have retained their little three-man rifle grenade teams, which never seem to actually do much. Looking at the terrain, we have a classic meaty engagement over a crest here. That means we can expect two broad kinds of engagements: close-range fighting over the crest itself, and longer-range engagements up or down the slope on either side. Neither of these are fantastic because we've got to try and hold the ridge. Getting in close at the crest doesn't fill me with confidence. We're up against Brazilians here, who are using the American TOE. That means 12-man rifle squads, and even if they have less firepower than the GIs because they're using bolt-action Springfields instead of semi-auto Garens, that's still a lot of firepower. But keeping my distance means surrendering the objective to the enemy. They might have a hard time up there if they're getting machine gunned from my secondary position, but fire alone is probably not going to be decisive in denying them the ridgeline, especially if they can camp out just on the far side where I can't see them. So I think there are two things I want to do here. First, I want to take advantage of the shape of the ridge. It's got a bit of an S-curve to it, which means that there are positions on either flank where troops at the crest can enfilade the approach. If I can get some MGs up there, I think I could make the run up the centre untenable. Second, I want to dominate the immediate area behind the crest line with mortars. Combat Mission allows mortars to fire just beyond their line of sight, so they should be able to lob bombs up and over the ridge line. I'll be getting some artillery as well later on, and I have a couple of FO teams that can direct it, and all the mortars. Ideally I'd want to be hitting the far side deeper than the direct firing mortars can, meaning I'll need to get at least one FO up to the top of the ridge. Would that I had any target reference points. That gives me a broad plan for an infantry position at either end of the objective. I have 3 platoons, so a platoon to each side makes sense. That would leave me one left over. The obvious place for it to go is the centre to hold the ridge and the objective, but my sense is that that whole area is going to be absolutely rinsed by enemy mortars and artillery, so I'm not a fan of that. I'd rather leave that whole area as a kind of fire sack. That would leave me one platoon in reserve, but my two positions are going to be so far away from each other and the terrain is so steep that it seems I'm naturally going to have to weight one flank over the other. I'm a bit more concerned about my left. The right will probably be more easily accessible to my reinforcements, so I'm going to lean left. The first reality that immediately kicks in when the battle starts is that all my advancing pixel truppen are going to do themselves in if I try and run them up the slope ahead of them. There are very good reasons for training fatigue for tactical advantage, but this is a big hill. My troops here are not in good physical condition, and I don't want them to lose the race to the crest because they ran the first 100 meters and then collapsed. So I change all their orders from quick to move and spend the first 5 minutes of the battle watching everybody slowly, agonizingly trudge the mere 300 meters to the top of the ridge. Most of them are still trying to get up there at the 5-minute mark, but a couple of teams are near the crest. The first to get there, 2nd Platoon's grenade launcher team, perches right on top and gets a burst of Thompson fire for its trouble. There are some enemy about 130 meters down the far side. The GL team go prone and lose the spot, but it looks like I'm going to be able to win the race to the crest over here. I'm not winning it on the far right though. I have 3 sniper teams attached to this company, and 2 of them plus one of the FOs are going out wide over on this flank. But they come under fire from Brazilian troops at close range near the crest. Obviously the enemy has had an easier time getting up this flank. They're on the cusp of seizing a section of crest that will allow them to fire along my side of the slope. Of course, I can do the exact same thing to them. Splitting 3rd Platoon down into teams and pushing them up to the crest, they start to engage what targets they can see off on the right. A 2-way range quickly develops. Both sniper teams over there go down, and I try to scurry the FO towards the centre before the enemy can get into a position to engage them. The deaths of the snipers does at least remove friendly targets from the enemy contacts closest to the top of the ridge, allowing me to start ranging in the 81s from the second line. Over on the left, I've brought most of 1st and 2nd Platoons right up to the crest, and they open up on the Brazilians slogging up the ridge. There are plenty of targets down there, but I'm getting into a face-to-face fight I'm not keen on. 1st Platoon in particular, spraying away with its MP44s in the dark, is not only sending its limited ammunition downrange at a worrying speed, but lighting itself up with muzzle flashes. They're undoubtedly causing casualties and forcing the advancing Brazilians to the ground, but they can't suppress all the squads out there, and they quickly start to take losses themselves. After a couple of minutes, it's clear that this is far too even a fight, and my teams on the crest are getting chewed up. So I decide to pull them back and give up the field of fire down the far side. 1st Platoon regroups on the far left, where the crest hooks round and gives them a position where they can sweep the ridge line. 2nd draws back a little, but maintains a few positions on the crest, where the slope gives them a little defilade to their front and fields of fire across the face of the centre. 2-1's MG42 in particular has found a good spot where they put devastating flanking, grazing fire into some Brazilian squads just on the edge of the objective. Meanwhile, things aren't looking good on the other flank. The exchange rate is probably about the same, but with only one rapidly diminishing platoon, the situation is getting increasingly precarious. Worse, there are loads of Brazilians out in the open, but my MGs aren't getting stuck in. 1st squad is rapidly pinned down and picked off. 2nd's MG team is in a fantastic position, but while the team leader has the field of fire and is happily mag-dumping his M40, the actual MG gunner is staring at a chunk of rock, and I can't micromanage him a meter to his left where he'd be able to engage. 3rd squad is a bit further to the right behind the crest, where they can cover my own side of the ridge if the enemy cross and try to hook in. Some of them have already made it, and the support teams in the second line are trying to cauterize the gap with MG and mortar fire. These at least look like they're effective. Some of the 81s are definitely falling into clumps of contact icons. Minute 17 of the battle brings an indicator that things are maybe going a bit better on the right than they look. A new surge of Brazilians crest the ridge and get chewed up by enfilade fire, but they're HMG teams, not rifle infantry. It definitely makes a degree of sense for the enemy to bring heavy weapons up on this flank. If he can get set up, he could potentially dominate my side of the ridge, but I would definitely expect them to come up behind the riflemen. Hopefully spotting them here is a sign that the preceding infantry wave has been ground down, or at least stopped in its tracks. Either way, the enemy don't make it over the crest this time. By the 20-minute mark, we have some kind of stability. The enemy doesn't seem to be making any progress. On the left, there's no sign of him approaching the crest. He's been trying to push the centre, but suffered heavy casualties from flanking MG fire. The right is up in the air, but he's probably gotten very severely mauled. So when my reinforcements arrive, my immediate thought is to counterattack. There are only 5 squads, but 2 of them are Sturm squads with an abundance of automatic weapons, and the 75mm howitzers have come online too. The right is clearly my biggest problem right now. 3rd Platoon has been pretty badly chewed up, and the 81mm mortars are all but out of ammunition, while the left and the centre look like they're managing. They're also much further away, and if the enemy can establish themselves on the right, they'll be able to get flanking fire on my reinforcements as they go up the slope. Something that I'm going to be more concerned about as the sun keeps rising and it gets lighter and lighter. So the plan is to send all 5 squads up the extreme right, clear the area where the Brazilians have crossed the ridge, then get up to the crest and complete the right edge of the bowl the enemy have advanced into on this flank. I don't know if there's that many of them still alive in there, but there's a lot of contact icons. The reinforcements start heading up the ridge, accompanied by the mortar teams and their ammo bearers as they run through their high explosive bombs. While they do that, I crawl the FO team near 3rd Platoon up towards the crest where they can see into the bowl and call in the 75s. This proves pretty dangerous. Those Brazilian HMG teams are set up on the far slope and they are putting a lot of fire down. The reinforcements don't have an easy time either. Some enemy squads made it over the crest and are waiting for them on the slope. They're annoyingly difficult to target, obscured to my slowly ascending infantry by the curve of the hillside, and to my supporting MGs by some trees. The first contact is bloody and doesn't go my way, but extending left and right lets me bring more firepower to bear, and within a few minutes the Brazilians are all wiped out. 15 minutes after arriving, the reinforcements are reaching the crest and getting stuck in. There are still some enemy just on the other side and a fierce fight breaks out, but I've gotten my heavily armed Sturm squads up, and between torrents of automatic fire and volleys of hand grenades, they're able to clear the crest. Despite the FO team losing their radio man, the 75s have started coming in by this point. It's hard to tell if they're being effective, but soon I have more fire teams up to the crest, enfilading the far side. There are bodies all over the place. Obviously the Brazilians have really had a bad time, and with more pressure from 3rd Platoon resuming their firing positions with backup from the mortar teams, it doesn't take much for them to crumble. A few teams hold out near the crest. Cowering there is probably safer than running away down the slope now that it's covered by fire, but there's nothing stopping me from steadily mopping them up. On the left, meanwhile, I'm starting to run out of ammunition. The fire team with the MG covering the centre has by this stage racked up about 30 kills, which is pretty crazy, but they've run through their entire supply of ammunition and are rapidly using the 8mm Mauser of the teams I brought over to resupply them. It's not just the MG as well. The adjacent platoon HQ is also completely out of ammo. I've dispatched one of the HMG teams from the second line to reinforce 1st Platoon's position on the far left, which would free up some more infantry teams, but they're still a fair way away with lots of ground to cover. The enemy is starting to advance here again, so I make the call to disengage from the crest completely, let them come up and destroy them with fire from the flank. There are still about 25 minutes on the clock. If they do manage to establish themselves, I should be able to bring pressure to bear from the far right, now that the situation there is under control. The first 2 Brazilians coming up are mown down, then the AI suddenly throws in the towel. That makes it a total victory, but the casualties tell the story. I've lost 76 men in total, just over a third of my total force, but I've still got 142 still in the fight. The Brazilians have lost 213 and only have 47 left to contest the objective. They do have some stragglers near the crest in the centre who could potentially do that, but they don't represent a realistic threat. This battle was definitely all about the terrain. Getting teams, especially machine guns, into the right places on that sinuous ridge line where they could get effective flanking and frequently enfilading grazing fire onto the enemy was absolutely key. And that came down to getting there firstest with mostest. I had so many problems on the right because the Brazilians just about reached the crest at the same time as 3rd Platoon and the snipers. If that situation had been replicated elsewhere along the ridge, I would have had a serious challenge on my hands. It's not hard to see the battle going in completely the opposite direction if I'd been a little bit slower getting up to the top. The second tactical supposition that I had, that the mortars would be useful in a direct fire roll, turned out to be a lot less critical. That isn't to say that they weren't effective. Together they racked up about 30 kills, but they only had 18 high explosive bombs each and were very limited in how far they could engage over the crest. Registering the far side of the slope for fire and getting some target reference points down the mortars could target without line of sight would have been an absolute game changer. They're really a must for fighting over this kind of terrain feature. Anyway, that's the Riva Ridge scenario from Fortress Italy. A good bit of fun, an interesting challenge. A little bit unfortunate that the Brazilians' debut on the channel involved them getting piloted to destruction by the AI, but mechanically they're not that different from the French that we've seen before, at least in terms of TOE. Hope you all enjoyed this one. If you'd like to see these videos early and support the channel, you can do so via Patreon and YouTube memberships, believe you or not. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.